530 million years ago, every mollusk on Earth was basically a slug. No eyes, no arms, no brain worth mentioning. Fast forward to today, and one branch of that family tree can solve puzzles, recognize human faces, and count to 5. Another branch edits its own genetic code in real time, something almost no other animal on Earth does. Meanwhile, still snails, still sitting on rocks. What happened to cephalopods that didn't happen to anything else? The Cambrian Ocean was a strange place. Around 530 million years ago, the ancestors of every cephalopod alive today were cone-shelled creatures sitting on the seafloor, not much different from a limpet. According to the Smithsonian Ocean Portal, these early mollusks diverged from monoplacophorans, a group of bottom-dwelling animals with tall, slightly curved shells. They looked like snails, they acted like snails, and for a long time, that was the whole story. Then one of them figured out buoyancy. A creature called Plectronoceras evolved the ability to fill parts of its shell with gas, lifting itself off the bottom and into open water. That single innovation cracked the ocean wide open. Suddenly, these animals could drift, steer, and hunt in 3 dimensions instead of crawling along the mud. And once they were off the seafloor, natural selection went to work on them fast. The nautiloids came first, spreading across the Cambrian and Ordovician oceans in enormous numbers. According to the Smithsonian, over 10,000 species of shelled cephalopods eventually swam the ancient seas. They were the apex predators of their time, cruising in coiled and straight-shelled forms while fish were still figuring out how to have jaws. The nautilus, the one survivor of that entire dynasty, still drifts through deep tropical water today, pumping gas through chambers in its shell to rise and sink. It is a living window into what cephalopods used to be, slow, armored, and relying on a shell for protection. But somewhere around 300 million years ago, a few lineages started doing something radical. They began shrinking the shell. Some internalized it, tucking a thin remnant inside their body. Others ditched it entirely, and as the shell disappeared, the body changed. Without that rigid external housing, the animals became soft, flexible, and vulnerable. They needed new ways to survive. The brain was the answer, or rather a nervous system unlike anything else in the animal kingdom. According to the Natural History Museum in London, a common octopus has roughly 500 million neurons. That is in the same range as a dog, but the architecture is completely alien. In a dog or in you, the vast majority of neurons sit inside the skull. In an octopus, 2/3 of those neurons are distributed across the 8 arms. Each arm contains its own cluster of nerve cells, essentially functioning as a local processing center that can taste, touch, and make decisions without consulting the central brain at all. A 2020 study from the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology confirmed just how independent these arms can be. Researchers found that when an octopus arm encounters food, neurons in the arm itself can initiate a motor response, grasping and pulling the food toward the mouth, without the central brain ever issuing a command. The arm decides and acts before the brain finds out. According to the study, this arm-up decision mechanism means octopus arms are not simple limbs waiting for orders. They are semi-autonomous agents exploring the environment on their own terms. Even severed arms keep working. According to Smithsonian Magazine, a detached octopus arm will still respond to touch, still reach for food, and still try to pass it toward where the mouth used to be, up to an hour after being separated from the body. The neurons in the arm do not know the body is gone. They just keep running their local program. This is a fundamentally different solution to the problem of intelligence. Vertebrates centralized everything in the skull. Cephalopods spread the processing power across the entire body. You could argue that an octopus does not have one brain. It has 9, 1 central and 8 peripheral, all loosely coordinated but capable of acting alone. And they use that distributed intelligence in ways that keep surprising researchers. According to a 2010 study published in the Journal of Applied Animal Welfare Science, giant Pacific octopuses at the Seattle Aquarium learned to distinguish between individual human keepers. 2 people, wearing identical uniforms, interacted with the octopuses over 2 weeks. One fed them. The other poked them with a bristly stick. After 2 weeks, every single octopus behaved differently toward the 2 humans. They moved toward the feeder and retreated from the poker, identifying specific faces through learned visual recognition alone. Then there is tool use. In 2009, researchers documented veined octopuses in Indonesia carrying discarded coconut shell halves across the seafloor, then assembling them into a shelter when they needed to hide. The octopus picked up the shells, tucked them under its body, walked awkwardly across open ground, and then later combined the 2 halves into a protective dome. That behavior requires planning for a future need, not just reacting to a present one. It was one of the first documented cases of tool use in any invertebrate. Squid evolved a different set of compromises. Their brains are centralized, not distributed like an octopus. But the architecture comes with a design flaw that sounds like it was invented for a horror movie. According to New Zealand's Te Papa Museum, the squid brain is shaped like a donut, and the esophagus runs straight through the hole in the center. If a squid swallows a piece of food that is too large, it can physically damage its own brain on the way down. The colossal squid, an animal that can weigh over 300 kilograms, has a brain smaller than 100 grams, and the narrow esophagus threading through it means every meal is a calculated risk. Cuttlefish, the third major cephalopod group, went in yet another direction. According to a study published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B by researchers at National Tsinghua University in Taiwan, cuttlefish can count. In the experiment, month-old cuttlefish were presented with two clear chambers containing different numbers of shrimp. The animals consistently chose the chamber with more food, reliably distinguishing between quantities up to 5. That puts their number sense on par with human infants and some primates. If you're finding this interesting, hit subscribe. More deep dives into animal biology come out on this channel regularly. Counting, face recognition, tool use, and a nervous system that makes independent decisions at the limb level. All of that runs on molecular machinery that is equally alien. According to a study published in the journal Cell and covered by the University of Chicago, cephalopods edit their own RNA at a rate that is unmatched in the animal kingdom. In humans, less than 1% of RNA transcripts in the brain get edited after being copied from DNA. In coleoid cephalopods, the group that includes octopuses, squid, and cuttlefish, that number jumps to over 60%. More than half of the RNA messages in a cephalopod's brain are being rewritten after they leave the genome. RNA editing lets these animals fine-tune proteins without changing the underlying DNA. Think of DNA as a cookbook and RNA as the recipe you actually follow in the kitchen. In most animals, the recipe matches the cookbook almost exactly. In cephalopods, the cook is rewriting the recipe on the fly, swapping ingredients and adjusting proportions in real time. The result is a library of protein variants that can be tailored to specific conditions, like cold water, stress, or a new environment, without waiting for the slow process of genetic mutation across generations. But that flexibility comes with a cost. According to the Marine Biological Laboratory, which co-led the research, the regions of DNA surrounding heavily edited RNA sites are unusually conserved. They barely mutate at all. The reason is that RNA editing machinery needs the surrounding DNA sequence to stay intact in order to recognize where to make its edits. Change the DNA too much and the editing system breaks. So cephalopods made a trade. They gained the ability to rapidly adjust their own brain chemistry on the fly, but they gave up the standard engine of long-term evolution, DNA mutation. Their genomes change more slowly than you would expect for animals this complex. They are editing instead of evolving, adapting in real time instead of across generations. Joshua Rosenthal, one of the lead researchers, put it this way in the Cell paper. Mutation is usually the currency of natural selection, and cephalopods are suppressing that to maintain recoding flexibility at the RNA level. No other branch of the mollusk family tree does this. Clams do not edit their RNA. Snails do not edit their RNA. Nautiluses, the oldest surviving cephalopod lineage, barely do it either. This is something the coleoid cephalopods invented on their own, roughly coinciding with the period when they began losing their shells and building bigger brains. That timeline is probably not a coincidence. Losing the shell meant losing the primary defense mechanism their ancestors had relied on for hundreds of millions of years. Without armor, these animals needed speed, camouflage, and intelligence to survive. RNA editing may have been one of the tools that let them build all three. A nervous system that can rewrite its own signaling molecules in real time could adapt faster to threats, learn faster from experience, and process sensory information in ways that a more rigid genome could not support. Consider what that means for the cephalopod you see in a documentary, changing color in a fraction of a second or unscrewing a jar from the inside. That animal is running on a nervous system that is architecturally alien, distributed across its body in a way no vertebrate matches, and biochemically alien, editing its own molecular instructions at a pace that is 60 times higher than yours. It arrived at intelligence through a completely different evolutionary path. No backbone, no skull protecting a centralized brain, no stable genome quietly accumulating mutations over millennia. And yet it recognizes your face, uses tools, counts its food, and rewrites its own biology faster than any mammal on the planet. 530 million years ago, every mollusk was a slug on the seafloor. Clams stayed put, snails stayed put. Nautiluses kept their shells and drifted through the deep. But one lineage gave up its armor. spread its neurons across 8 arms, invented a molecular editing system that barely exists anywhere else in nature, and built the closest thing to alien intelligence on this planet. If you want more stories like this, they are all on the channel.